Hello and welcome to Best for Women Live. My guest joining me today is Niki Watts, the founder of Thai Fitness. And I'm really excited about our topic today because it's something that I literally know nothing about, which is trauma-informed fitness. So really excited to have her here. Let's bring Best for Women Live. For those of you who haven't met me before, again, my name is Brooke Gordon, and I'm delighted to be here as your host.
Hello.
And here she is, perfectly timed.
Awesome. Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome. Niki, I want to take a moment to just share our origin story because I think it really speaks to the power of what we've actually been working to create here. So this is our first time meeting and chatting
Yeah.
before. And tell us a little bit about how you found out about me and for Best for Women.
So basically, I'm part of an alumni group, and I actually got your name from Lori Kennedy. So she teaches women how to, put their expertise into a program and how to coach and help people. So she mentioned on one of the alumni coaching calls, now's a great time for networking. Now's a great time to, get out there and talk to other women, talk to other people, whoever your ideal clients are. And she mentioned your name for business resources. She's like, go ahead, and she's like, you can even mention to Brooke that you know me, and and just kind of go from there. And yeah, when I was reaching out to you, I was reaching out first for business resources, but then I was like, I told you a little bit about myself and what I do, and then here we are now, doing a podcast together, which is really amazing. So it was awesome. It was great advice to give. And then, now here we are, right? The power of like networking and, women just, connecting with other women.
Oh, I love that. And I'm so glad that you're here.
Yeah,
So now
thank
that
you.
we've got a little bit of connection together, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're passionate about the idea of trauma-informed fitness.
Absolutely. So I've been in the fitness industry since about 2006, first doing like personal training in person. And then over the years, after working in gyms, I decided to start my own business. And then along that journey, of course, very much first, focused on personal training, helping people with their goal, helping mostly women with their goals, like whatever it is, like weight loss, whether it's strength training. And about maybe 1 to 2 years after starting my business, I decided to get into yoga teaching. So I had done yoga as my own practice before. In fact, how I got introduced to yoga was I didn't necessarily take classes, but I took like my mom's little book. She had a little yoga book, and I was actually doing it to try and deter myself from, I had an alcohol addiction when I was younger. So I was trying to replace those habits with healthy new habits. And that's how I actually found yoga before I even got into the personal training and before even getting certified as a personal trainer. So I've been practicing on my own. And then in 2009, when I had scoliosis, once again, I was reintroducing myself back to yoga, just using it for chronic pain at that point, and just realigning my spine, getting more into the stretching. And then once I had my own business, I was like, it's time for you to teach. And so I took level one with Yoga Fit, and that's actually how I started my yoga journey, is through them. And I ended up getting my 200-hour, I think it was 2018. And one of the courses that they actually have as a prerequisite for your 200-hour is they call it the Warriors Yoga, because it's mostly like anybody can do it, but it was developed for veterans. It's the trauma sensitive informed yoga. And it was basically an introduction to it. I'd never done like a yoga like that before. I was so much used to, at that point, all the other, different forms of yoga, the vinyasa, the power yoga, the Hatha yoga. And so this was totally brand new to me. And I actually, when I was, in the class, it was interesting because I was actually learning a lot about myself, because I didn't realize at the time that, maybe as a child I did have, seed PTSD, and I did have anxiety and depression when I had had my daughter back in 2010. So, I'm very familiar with having to deal with those things. And when we did the trauma sensitive yoga, it was really eye opening to me. But it was also, I felt the benefits immediately off of the 2 master classes that we did that day, because it's very slow flow, but the whole purpose is to, oh, sorry.
No. Okay, I
is,
want to pause there for just a moment because
yes.
that's so amazing. So
Yeah.
in your journey, so we're going to get into what it is and how it works, but I just want to pick out a few things that you said
Yes.
before while they're still fresh. And one of them is the moments that you leaned into fitness. So you leaned into fitness, and I want to thank you first for
Yeah.
being bold and brave by sharing your own testimony and your own journey, because
Yeah.
there's 2 things that you mentioned. One was pain and moving to movement as a way of natural pain relief. And then the
Yes.
second one was moving towards yoga in particular as a way of replacing a need that you had been filling through another substance.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, this is where, it wasn't just about changing those healthy habits, but like, releasing past stuff that may have maybe led me to, getting into alcoholism, right? And, a lot of times with addiction, the root cause is not necessarily this or that. The root cause has a lot of its roots in trauma. So, trauma can be, and some people, the way that they deal with trauma is different, right? Some people, do go down that road of addiction and, substance abuse, whereas others may go down an entirely different road, right? So, yeah, no, it's been definitely, as much as yoga is, people think it's just stretching, there's a work out part to it, but then there's also that work in and a lot of healing and like re-engineering and your body and mind.
Okay, tell me a little bit more about that, because I think this ties into where you were about to go
Yes.
with. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back over to you.
So with yoga, it connects our body, mind, and soul, right? So even if you're just doing a regular yoga practice, the basis is to connect our body, mind, and soul together, to yoga it, right? And this is where yoga can be really beneficial in re-engineering our body and mind. Now, when it comes to the trauma sensitive yoga, and especially the way that it's cued, and it can actually help you rewire your brain. So when somebody goes through PTSD, they go through trauma, or maybe there's a lot of stressful situations and events that go on in their life, this can actually change the brain chemistry, can change how they view the world, their perspective of the world. And especially if they're going through like depression and anxiety, their perspective is different from somebody who's not going through that. So what trauma sensitive yoga can help with is rewiring the brain. So, when we do go through, traumatic events, we might be on alert a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more. We might be extra cautious about certain things. Now, there are like real life threats where it's like, yeah, we should be alert when that happens. But with PTSD, people are constantly on alert, even when there's not any danger involved. So what trauma sensitive yoga helps with is it helps activate that parasympathetic nervous system, but it also helps to rewire your brain so that you can be, even though the event happened, you can, move forward into acceptance of, it's okay that it happened,
Mm-hmm.
but it can also prepare you too for other stressful events that may occur in the future that you may not have any control of. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing too is it helps you get out of your head and back into your body, that body awareness.
Okay, tell me about that, because I'm hearing a couple of things, and I want to dig
Mm-hmm.
in afterwards to how cueing is different, because I think that's really valuable. But tell me more
Yes.
about this piece. How does it get? Because okay, so from my own experience with yoga, one
Mm-hmm.
of the things. Oh, we've got a great question, but I see you. I am mortgages, and we'll get to your question in a moment. But I think one of the things that I've had when I first started taking yoga, I was at a studio local to me, and the class that I actually enjoyed the most was not Hatha, although I tried it. It was one that they had, which was like a restorative yoga. And
Okay.
so everything was, the room was warm, but not too hot. The lights were really low. There were candles everywhere. And it was just and every pose that we went into, we would stay for a while. And it left you with sort of, now you're there and you are very present with whatever discomfort you have in that pose.
Right,
And it,
right.
right, and so it does one of two things. Either it brings you immediate, well, for me it brought me either immediately present to, this is not a comfortable pose and I need to figure out how to accommodate myself. And then the second piece was, if I was comfortable, then now I'm alone in my head in a silent room.
Okay, so yeah, how it differs is we have psychosomatic cueing. Somatic cueing is there's a little bit of like we kind of get you to use your imagination a little bit into it, but also when we're going through the flow, like for example, going into bridge pose for a count of 4 or a count of 8. So, there's a little bit of, you're paying attention to your breath, but you're also paying attention to how slow you're actually going into like different flows, right? So we'd go from, say, from lying down position to bridge pose for a count of 4 or count to 8,
Yeah.
or same when you're going from child's pose to plank for count of 4 or count of 8. And it's, we're slowing down the movement so that we're slowing down the thoughts, and then, bringing ourselves back to that present moment, because a lot of the times with PTSD, and especially anxiety and depression, we're in our heads, we're thinking either about the future or we're thinking about the past, or especially with PTSD, maybe we're having flashbacks, we're having intrusive thoughts, and we're not actually being present. So, we always start with constructive rest pose, where you're lying on your back, and then instead of having your legs are bent, but there's a little bit more length to the bend, so that you're actually releasing or relaxing the psoas there. And then we focus on that deep diaphragmatic breathing so that we can activate the parasympathetic nervous system and come back to that present moment. And a lot of the cueing that we're doing is very, describing what you're feeling with the body, but also, just feeling that wave of relaxation, for example, or, when we're in butterfly. Let's be butterflies, right? Where are we going to fly to today? Kind of using imagery too, sometimes in some of our classes, along with like the slow flow. And, for a count of 8, we're moving into the plank. And then, count of 8, we're moving back into your child's pose, right? So it's very, it's different cueing altogether than your regular Hatha class or your power
Yeah.
yoga class. Yeah, and there's a lot of sometimes positive affirmations that we put in there too, just so that, we're also trying to change some of those beliefs that, or maybe that negative thinking that sometimes goes on
I
as
love
well.
that. One thing I really noticed in that cueing is the idea of the count. So count for me does two things. One, it gives you something to focus on. So you're thinking about the counting, which means that you have to be present. As a personal trainer myself, that's the one thing that I'm just like, oh man, I got to count. I got to remember to count. I got to remember how many I just did on the left to do on the right. Yeah, counting's the worst, but it has to
Yeah.
keep you present, right? Because you have to
Yes.
remember where you are in the count. If you drift off, you lose count. But the
Right.
other piece I really like about that is you let them know exactly how long they're going to be in the pose. Because one of the things I find with yoga is you're going to be there and you might be there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you're there for a long while and sometimes you're there for a short while. And so you're creating almost a predictability that
Yes.
creates a sense of safety. Am I gathering this correctly?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because when we go through traumatic events, like it's not controlled. It's not like we chose to go through that or to have that done to us. And the whole idea with the trauma sensitive yoga is it puts that control back to you. It gives you back that control. And one of the things that I love saying And all of my yoga practices, this is your practice. And I always love giving different options. Now with the trauma sensitive yoga, I still give options, right? But, you know, I'll be like, this is your practice, you know, make it, do what you feel is necessary today, right? And, you know, there is that sense of safety because you're giving control back to that person who's in the class that, you know, if they want to take a rest period during one of the poses, they can do that. Or, you know, if they want to flow with what the class is doing, they can do that as well. But yeah, that's a big thing, is just having that control, because that gives that sense of safety back to them.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Now, you may not be able to answer this question, but between the two of us, I think we can. So we've been asked, what is the difference between Pilates and yoga? Because our viewer thinks that they're quite similar.
Okay, so with yoga, there's different styles of yoga. There's Hatha yoga where, you know, you're holding the poses for, you know, anywhere from 3 to 10 breaths, and then you're flowing, you know, transitioning and flowing to another one. Now, there's the style of yoga I was taught was through Yoga Fit, and it's a mix of the flow yoga and the Hatha. So where we're doing the work part is where we're doing more of those holding the poses, right? In the beginning, we're doing a little bit of flow to warm up the body. But Pilates and yoga are very similar. Pilates is more, I mean, it depends to where you go. If you're going to a yoga studio and doing Pilates, the cool thing is those things too can be very easily intertwined. There is different types of yoga, like for example, our power yoga. There's power yoga for strength, and then there's power yoga for cardio. So power yoga for strength might use more of the Pilates moves, along with, you know, holding power yoga moves for, could be anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes or more, depending on what kind of a flow it is. The other thing too with Pilates is there's other tools that you can use, right? So if you go to an actual where they just do Pilates, they'll have these different, I forget what they're called, but there's
a
different
reformer.
Right,
Reformer is one of them. Cadillac is another one. The barrel arcs. Yeah, a lot of more props. So that was my background, is in Pilates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So you're a Pilates teacher. That's amazing.
So,
nice.
Pilates student. But yeah, it's
okay.
but one of the things I think is similar is that it's almost like a collection, if you will, of very specific moves that you flow between, in and out of. Right. Whereas the moves themselves are different. But a lot of the principles of what you're trying to get to are very similar. So it's just the approach is different. Where you talked about sort of the mind, body, spirit connection, in Pilates, you're going to be more focused on the body and the breath. So you're deeply connecting into the breathing, and the breathing is regulated and defined in Pilates as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and when a girlfriend of mine, she teaches Pilates at a studio down in Toronto. First time using, I don't know which machine it was called now. It was either the Reformer or the Cadillac. But anyways, it was like I was reawakening that one side of me, which, you know, it just felt really amazing. And she kept repeating, she's like, you're reawakening this spot. And it's definitely more work, but very similar, just I would say Pilates has a lot more props. And I feel like it more focuses on the work part. There's still a cool down, there's still a warm up. So that part, how it flows, is very similar. It's just you're using these different props. And there's also the Pilates ball. So I would say Pilates is more for, like, you know, you're building strength without necessarily using a weight. And you can still build strength in yoga as well. It's just you're using more of like your own body weight and challenging yourself into maybe more advanced poses, as opposed to using a prop. Or you know, sometimes when they do a Pilates and yoga class together, you know, you're kind of getting a flow of the work with the Pilates and then the Hatha. So it really the two and two can go together well. But yeah, there is definitely a difference between the two of them.
Yeah, says the Pilates and the yoga people. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So some of the other things that you were talking about is this sort of the use of, we were talking about cueing, the use of visualization,
Yes.
the fact that the work is really about staying connected in the moment, using counting, using predictability.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about why this is so important to you. Why is it that you love teaching?
You know what? I've been passionate about fitness ever since. I mean, I did like fitness when I was younger, but I was more of an artist back then. I was more into my art. And I think it was when I guess I started to see the benefits of how, especially when I kind of went through my own, I guess you could call them spiritual awakenings, like, having alcoholism at a young age and then being like, okay, if I want to make something of myself, I have to change these habits. And that's where it first like ignited a light inside me. And I was like, what do I like to do? I'm like, well, I like to work out. And then, feeling those benefits that I was getting from, working out, lifting with weights. And then I don't know, I guess I'm passionate because I like to help people. I like to help people feel good in their bodies. I also like to help them understand their bodies too and what's going on, whether that's from just a health and fitness perspective, but also a mindfulness and, being aware of, when we go into fight and flight mode, how we can self-regulate because, especially when it comes to people who have been through trauma and then they're gone through chronic stress and then they feel almost limited by their anxiety and their depression. I know I was there, for a few years where it felt like my anxiety and depression were kind of like ruling my life, and it wasn't a good time for me. So I kind of got on this mission of, just overcoming that, but empowering myself with the tools. And then through that, this is why I'm passionate about it, is because I would love to help everybody just feel empowered with the tools that they need to feel good, whether that's for their health and their fitness, or especially in the mindfulness perspective. Overcoming trauma is a big thing, and I mean, about 60% of people have gone through at least one trauma in their life. Women more so than men. And, with those statistics, it's like, there's a need, right? But it doesn't mean that everybody that goes through trauma one time in their life is going to develop PTSD or anxiety or depression from it. There is a percentage that does end up developing that. And especially if, there's more stress that has ensued after that trauma as well. And, when we know how to regulate ourselves, it can be really liberating. It can really, not just help with our mood and stuff. It can be really liberating. And, now I can be me. Now I can, go out and do the things that, I thought I couldn't before, or, overcome those things that were maybe stopping me before, so that, everybody's got a purpose. So So, just even helping them release that, because, when we have too much stress, especially trauma, and on top of that, that chronic stress, it can lead to illness. It can lead to chronic pain. And, that's another reason too, why I'm so passionate, is because having to go through scoliosis and having that chronic pain, I've had times where, I was amazed by some of the things that I was able to do. Right. And then going through, trauma as an adult, like having a car accident, that was a really eye opener for me, because it totally changed me. I went through a traumatic brain injury too. So it was like dealing with a whole new brain, and the yoga definitely helped. But when I started to do that trauma sensitive yoga, that was a big help, because it just helped me manage some of those symptoms better. And this is a big reason why I do what I do. It's just to help people move past pain, move past, that, the thoughts and the emotions that might be keeping them down, so, they can feel well, have that, feel whole again, but also, get back to what they were enjoying doing in life, or, whatever their next phase is too.
Yeah, absolutely. Nikki, I love that, because one of our previous guests on Best for Women was Alison Crouch, who's a Pilates instructor.
Oh, nice.
But our actual topic of conversation was around irritable bowel syndrome and IBS.
Yeah.
And both she and I have used movement as a way of managing our IBS.
Oh,
And
that's amazing.
Well, and as you were sharing some of your experiences, you talked about the word liberation, you used, I
Yeah.
know, sort of this reawakening. And it resonated with me because when I first started taking weight training, and I want to touch on this a little bit together, one of the things that came about for me was a new sense of confidence in myself because I knew that I could pick up something heavy without injuring myself. Mine also happened to be a herniated disc was my
Oh,
original site of
wow.
injury. And my doctor put me into, so once I finished seeing the specialist, she's like, okay, it was so funny. She's like, I don't do soft tissue. I'm like, oh, okay. And so she ended up putting me into Pilates. And
Nice.
yeah, and that was my part of my healing journey. And Pilates was a place for me of refuge. It was no matter how busy my day was, and no matter how I felt in that moment, I would always come to class because I knew that however I felt at the beginning, by the end of it, I would feel refreshed. I would feel myself for again. I would really have that sense of calm and accomplishment both. And I'm hearing some of
Yeah.
that in the classes that you teach as well. And I really love that. And when I moved in towards actual strength training, it was just, it literally changed my life because it healed, I'll say, a few symptoms that I've been living with, one of them being incontinence that had
Hmm.
shown up, part of the irritable bowel piece, and a few other pieces that just suddenly one day just weren't there anymore. You don't really notice that they've gone away. You just suddenly notice that they're just not there. It's lovely. But it also created a whole new sense of confidence and empowerment for me. It's how I finally got the courage to start learning how to ride a motorcycle and all kinds of other pieces that had been on my bucket list
Oh,
that,
wow.
the
Nice.
year before, I didn't think were accessible to me. So
Oh,
I
wow.
love in hearing you, I'm like reflecting on my own journey of how movement brought about for me literally a whole new sense of adventure, a whole new sense of really connecting with how I used to feel,
That's a,
say 20 years ago. So I love that your classes bring about the same for both you and for your students.
absolutely. Yeah, that's the really cool thing about, movement is, when we start moving that energy and we start releasing, the stuff that's really been just holding us back, that stuff that isn't serving us anymore, it can be really like liberating. And yeah, that's amazing that you had all that, like, just through, going to Pilates classes, right? It's all about finding, what works for you. What is it that you need to, take your next step, right? What is it that's going to help you heal? What is it that's going to empower you? And movement is one of the most empowering things that we can do. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was awesome. But Niki, one of the things I want to come back to sort of the classes that you
Yeah.
teach, I think there's a really important part because a lot of people hear that movement is really great for stress management, move is really great for all kinds of things,
Yes.
and then move into high intensity movement,
Right.
right? So their response to that, they live with stress, they're high energy in the stress, and then they move to high energy activity. So, whether it's picking up something heavy or it's being able to do like I'll say running or high intensity. There's so many different modalities out
Yes.
there and options for us. Tell me why the modality or your choice of having sort of the trauma informed yoga is actually a better response for someone who's undergoing stress than tapping back into a more intense, because you
Right.
feel great with the intensity and you're like, yeah, I did it. But
Right.
what would be the reasons why that's actually not a good choice for someone who's under stress?
So there are a couple of reasons. So when we're already constantly stressed, so there's certain things that go on in our body, that flight or fight, our stress response system, it turns on, right? And when it's constantly on, whether there's real threat or, it's just perceived threat, or it's just we're constantly going and we feel like we're on autopilot, our body does need rest. And for some reason in today's society, and especially if you live in a city, like it's very go 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 go, right? And it's almost like we're expected to be go go go. But when there's stressful things happening on top of like work, on top of, or maybe we just got too many demands happening, and what ends up happening is that because our stress response system is constantly turned on, when you go in, like when a person goes and does high intensity interval training or yoga hit, or they go to hit weights, even though it, you know, when they're not maybe in that stress state, it does make them feel good. And even though some of these, especially lifting weights, can help focus your mind, can help reduce cortisol, if you're already, you know, constantly in that stress response system, your cortisol levels are probably already high enough, because when we have that turned on, adrenaline gets released, cortisol gets released, right? Cortisol is that stress hormone that, you know, increases our appetite. It causes us to get like less sleep, feel wired at night, right? And then add that into the mix if you're not already getting the proper sleep, so you're already feeling extra stressed on top of it. One of the things that the trauma sensitive yoga helps with is actually chronic stress. And believe me, a lot of people do actually suffer from chronic stress. They just may not be aware of it. They may not be realizing that they're constantly on autopilot, or that, you know, maybe, you know, hitting a hard workout or a hard cardio jam, you know, or doing like high intensity interval training might actually make what they're feeling worse, especially if they're already in their head before they go to do a workout and they're like, oh, I'm just going to do a workout, but then they're in their head about something that happened or something that's going on in their life. So this is where that slow flow trauma sensitive yoga can actually really help. And one of the things that it works on, so a lot of our trauma and stress actually gets trapped in our psoas muscle. So our psoas muscle is a deep muscle that connects from our lower lumbar spine to our hip, and it helps with like flexion. You know, when we're doing ab exercises, especially like leg lifts and you know, different, I'll just use Pilates moves, different Pilates moves that are for like the lower core and the core. You know, as well as like any exercises that basically are involve flexion of our hip. Our psoas will get involved as well, right? And you know, that part's normal, that's fine, that's what it does. But when we're stressed, and then, you know, say we go do a really hard workout, you know, sometimes what can happen too is we can end up pulling certain muscles. We can end up like still wearing that tension in our body, but also it actually has this effect where we need to counter react the effects of stress. So what we're doing is that we're actually adding more, like we're causing that stress response system to turn on even more when we do those harder workouts. And especially if you're someone who's already constantly exhausted from stress of working too much or too many obligations, or maybe something like is going on in your life that, you know, is causing that stress, causing you to be in your head. The last thing that we want to do is actually like a hard, intense workout. And especially we want to actually do something that's more slow flow, gives us that body awareness, brings us back to our body. I know for myself, there's been times where I've wanted to do leg day, or I've wanted to do abs and back day. But if I was in my head and kind of going through something and I'm just like, I'm like, I want to do it, but I know if I do it, I'm going to feel this even worse. And I need something to just slow down.
And one of the other ones is you put yourself at risk of injury because you're not fully
Yes.
paying attention. Almost everyone I've
Yep.
ever met who has twisted or broken an ankle, it's like, how did that happen? Oh, well, I was super
Right.
stressed, right? Always
Yeah.
there's something else, and the stress load, and next thing you know, you've fractured or you've rolled on.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, there's one other piece that you said that I just really wanted to pick up on because I thought it was really cool. We talked about the psoas, and it's a muscle that not a lot of people know of, but everybody actually knows it because in not in humans, we often call it the tenderloin.
Oh, yes.
And when you think about what that muscle is, right, the fact that it's called the tenderloin, yes, because it's a lovely tenderized meat, but also because it's a really tender place for us. And if I am correct in this, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's also the muscle that helps us snap into or pull into the fetal position.
Yeah. It is. And actually, that's one of my favorite poses is like either child's pose, sleepy baby, or knees to chest pose. In fact, if you are someone who's, you know, on the verge of adrenal fatigue or burnout from just constantly going, not having a rest moment, one of the best things that you can do, especially if you notice that your energy is starting to take a toll because of that, is to go into either child's pose, or I love going into knees to chest pose. Back in 2019, I did end up having a little bit of adrenal fatigue just because I had some stressful situations come up, and I'd never experienced that before. I didn't know what it meant to like want to do all these things, but then you have no energy and you're literally on the couch. And even sitting up at certain points was, it was actually tiring me out. So I had to kind of learn, okay, how do I deal with this? And I kind of did a combination of a little bit of that trauma sensitive yoga, but knees to chest pose. Sometimes when my energy would just feel low, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do a little knees to chest pose. So where you get on your back, bring your knees in, and then just kind of rock side to side. And it would like rejuvenate my kidneys, because like you're literally rolling on that back part. So you're bringing energy to that area. And yeah, no, it's a really great,
I love
it's a
that.
nice calming pose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Niki, in our last moments together, do you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to, taking care of our health, it's not just about our physical health. It's about our mental, spiritual, and our emotional health. And, the more that we can learn to self-regulate and learn some of these self-regulation tools, like, yes, it is great to work with a therapist. And I definitely encourage people who, if they're going through PTSD, anxiety, depression, if they've been through trauma, it really helps to work with a therapist. It also helps to release some of what has happened, because we do wear stress in our body. We do wear trauma and emotions in our body. And just going back to like, when person works out and they're already going through emotional stuff, or they're doing it to distract themselves, but then they're still in their head. I mean, that's where injuries occur. And you could be working out and then you're thinking about the thing, and then all of a sudden you've pulled this muscle that you were working out on, or like you said, the fractures, right? So it's really important that we know how to self-regulate, that we take that time for our self-care. Like that's definitely been something that I've been working on, and I don't know, say the last 4 or 5 years, ever since I kind of started on that yoga journey, was just making time for the self-care, because it's so easy for us women to constantly put others ahead of our own needs, say yes, yes, yes to everything. And, it's okay for us to sometimes say, no, I can't, because I want to actually take a rest today, or I want to, and like rest can be, something that you enjoy, but most importantly, you can take that time to do some of these self-care practices. And especially with the trauma sensitive yoga, with the cueing, it's definitely different. It's, we kind of get you to like do the imagery, the counting. There's also some unique things too that we can add into it. For example, it's a very grounding practice. So the idea is to get you out of your head, to work on that root chakra, and come back, bring the energy from here down, back down again, get you back to that grounded. Because when we're grounded, we're moving away from those stress thoughts, we're more calm, we're able to think a lot clearer, we're not so scattered, and we can feel a lot better too when we're more grounded in our body.
100%. 100%. I love that. That's such a great example of what it means to come back into ourselves and be present with ourselves. Niki, thank you for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I love doing this interview with you and sharing, some tools that can help people, just because, especially after the pandemic, I know mental health is a big thing with a lot of, women, a lot of, men, and, even children now too, as well. So it's definitely something that, needs to be shared. It's the gift of yoga, right? So
love that. The gift of yoga, a great example. So thank you again. And for everyone who's visiting, you can find us at bestforwomen.ca/podcast. And there we'll have all of Niki's information, how to contact her, and her links to her site. So thank you again, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.